Hello, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Live. And right now it is apple picking season here in New England where I live. And, none of you are probably a stranger to what an apple is. I'm sure you've all had one. But do you really pay attention to the saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? There is a lot of truth to that. And so tonight we're going to find out a little bit more about the healthful properties of apple. My name's Allison from the Well Cultivated Life. So thanks for joining me here for show number 99 of Flower Power. Now, apples are thought to originate in Central Asia, basically where Kazakhstan is right now. And there are a lot of wild apples that grow around in that area and throughout sort of the northern hemisphere. And the genus is Malus, and there are several different species, and they're all in the rose family. Now, planting an apple tree in your garden is definitely a commitment. And should you choose to do so, you want to make sure that you have room for at least two trees because two trees are required to get a good amount of pollination. And apples, of course, are a tree. And so they are going to want a lot of sun. You want to have at least 8 hours of sun to grow them at least during the growing season. Although you're going to get less sun in the winter. So as long as it has that during the growing season. Now, one of the things to consider when you're looking to buy an apple tree is how big is it going to get? Because there are different varieties from dwarf up to standard. And I'll show you a picture in a minute of how that varies. Because if you get one that's too big, you're going to need a ladder to collect your apples. And I don't know about you, but climbing a ladder is not really one of my favorite things to do. So a dwarf tree, you can usually get fruit in about 2 to 3 years, depending on how big you purchase it at your local garden center. Whereas the standard trees will take up to almost 8 years before you start to bear fruit. Now, where I live, you're going to have to spray your apple trees with something. A lot of times you can just use what's called a dormant spray, where you're just spraying sort of an oil in the spring before leaf out that kills off a lot of the insect eggs and kind of smothers them with an oil. But it's pretty much impossible in the Northeast to grow organic apples. I'm not sure where they grow organic apples, but be prepared if you really want to have sometimes they're not even edible if you don't do a little bit of spraying. Now, some varieties are going to be more susceptible to disease and insect damage, so it's a good idea to do your research on that. Now, of course, let me show you the pictures here now before we go much further. Let's see here. So, of course, you all know what an apple looks like, but a lot of people don't really ever get the chance to see an apple growing on a tree. They'll just be plucking an apple out of the bin at the grocery store or perhaps at the farmer's market. Now, around here, there's a lot of apple or lot fewer than there used to be, but you can go for agritainment, as I like to call it, where you can go and pick your own apples. And it's a super lovely thing to do in the fall with the family. Oops, went too far. Of course, in the springtime, this is what the apple orchards look like, with just completely covered with these pinkish white blooms. And you can just imagine the bees and other pollinators that are all over these things early in the year. And as I said earlier, this is part of the rose family, and that's distinctive look to the flowers is one of the things that helps you determine that. And it's these 5 petals, 5 stamens, and 5 pistils that are going to give you, guess how many seeds? 5 seeds inside an apple. Here is a slide about the dwarf. So the size, very dwarf, semi-dwarf, semi-vigorous, and vigorous. I learned that as standard. These are some other names for it. So as you can see, if you want to be able to pick your own apples, you're going to want to get a dwarf or a semi-dwarf variety. Okay. So, of course, you probably should have planted your apple tree about 10 years ago, but if you're in the place where you can do it and you have the space for it, why not plant for the future? Now, you will notice that when we go to the market, normally we are buying our vegetables like as carrots or beans, kale, chard, whatever, and we don't really know what variety of these plants we are purchasing. However, with apples, you have a type that you like, and you're going and you're picking out this particular. Maybe you're a green apple type of person. Maybe you're a red delicious person, and so on. But we used to have thousands of different apple varieties available. And if you go to a more like an heirloom orchard, you will see that they have a lot more varieties than what you usually see in the grocery store. And in part, this is in thanks to somebody that we just think of as a character who was actually a real person, and that is Johnny Appleseed. Now, his real name was John Chapman. And in the book, Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan, if you haven't read it and you're watching my show, you really should. It's really well written. It tells the story of 4 different plants that have sort of co-evolved with humans, and one of those being apples. And so Johnny Appleseed basically took apple seeds and planted in mostly in Ohio, well, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana. He would buy little plots of land and he would plant a apple nursery, and then he'd come back, a few years later and check on it. And over time, what happened was these apple seeds would grow some random type of apple. But the more he planted, every once in a while they would find an apple that was actually pretty good. And those apples would then be taken and developed more into a variety. And so these days, once you find a good apple, you don't plant from seed anymore. You basically take a cutting and you put it onto a rootstock and you grow the apple that way to get, and most fruit is pretty much all fruit is grown like this now. Now, the thing is, what happened to all of those varieties of apples that weren't so great? Well, Johnny Appleseed was relatively religious, and he loved nature and never wanted to harm nature. And he probably wouldn't be so happy to know that most of those not so tasty apples probably got made into hard cider. At least that's the story that Michael Pollan tells in his book. And again, it's a fascinating book. I highly recommend it. So, other than cider, apples themselves have a lot of really incredible health benefits. Now, I'll talk about the few medicinal uses in the future, but there's been a lot of research on just eating apples. This saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, is quite legitimate. There's a lot of research showing that apples, and especially like the pectin and some of the other constituents in the apple, have a lot of sort of disease fighting qualities, and in particular, anti-cancer abilities. They're tested it on several different kinds of cancer, but primarily there was a lot of research on gastrointestinal type of or colorectal cancer, excuse me, and that what they think is happening, these constituents stop the cancer cells from actually even initiating in the first place, as opposed to fighting against cancer cells that already exist. So it also can help to detox your body, and it works on sort of radioactive particles. I mean, there has been a lot of radioactive material put into the atmosphere, and in particular, this was done in an experiment with people who were exposed to the Chernobyl accident, and was able to remove a lot of the radioactivity that was stored in the body tissues. It also helps with other basic health things, helps to prevent hardening of the arteries and plaque formation, helps with weight loss, anti-aging for like sort of cognitive function and that sort of thing, bowel inflammation and diarrhea, and also periodontal disease. Have you ever been told, brush your teeth or eat an apple if you can't brush your teeth, right? And it helps to clean it. And one of the quotes from the article that I was reading about this from Green Med Info, which is a great site that has a lot of this sort of health information. He says, apples are not medicine. Rather, they are the means by which medicines become unnecessary. It is, and then he goes on to say about it's this combination of nourishment and detoxification, something we don't really think about when it comes to our health and diet. You think about, oh, I got to eat the right things, but you also have to get rid of the wrong things. And so this is one of the places that apple really helps to help prevent and treat disease. Now, apples are obviously moistening. Have a lot of water in them, and they're also cooling, like many of the rose family plants. And so they've been used for a variety of things. And it was interesting because what I found is that there isn't like some plants we know it's used for A, B, and C, but apple was kind of used for a variety of different things and a number of different things. And so one of them was, again, getting back to this sort of detox aspect, was when someone is kind of a sedentary or sluggish person, maybe they're eating a lot of meats and their liver is getting a little filled up with gunk. Apple can really help to detox that. And so this is one of the reasons why I always love it when things we just kind of do turn out to have a health benefit. Have you ever had, sorry to all you vegetarians, pork chops and applesauce, right? They go together. Throw some rosemary in there and you're good to go, because that's also helpful for sort of defatting your foods or helping your fats digest better. So it's also been used to calm stomach, and the cooling properties means it can be used for fevers or any other kind of place where there was heat, and also has some affinity for the kidneys and gallstones and gout and these kinds of like built up hard things such as, like I said, kidney stones. So the other thing that I loved was that the leaves, and these are some leaves from my crab apples in my yard. I don't have an apple, but I do have some beautiful crab apples. And they have fallen down, of course, this time of year, but you would use these as a poultice on your eyes for different types of eye inflammation. What do you think? Stylish. So that was one of the other things. And then, of course, one thing that a lot of people are familiar with is the apple cider vinegar. Now, apple cider vinegar was also shown to have some of these anti-tumor properties. But just this weekend, I led a workshop, a winter wellness workshop, and we used apple cider vinegar to create one of the famous herbal concoctions called fire cider. And this is basically a food-based mixture of different sorts of healing foods like garlic and ginger and onions and some other things. And it's extracted with the apple cider vinegar. And the reason why it works so well is because this vinegar pulls a lot of the nutrients, especially mineral nutrients, out of the plant or the food or whatever it is that you're soaking it in. So that is another great use for apple cider vinegar. And it has also been touted just on its own as being helpful for acid reflux and those sorts of conditions. So now the flower essence, the crab apple flower essence, is one that was one of the original essences that Edward Bach sort of co-created back in the 30s. But there's also an apple essence. And whenever I'm looking up information for a food-based essence, I always use this handbook here, the Essential Flower Essence Handbook from Lila Debbie, Spirit and Nature Essences. And she says that the apple flower essence helps to sort of stimulate our mindset that promotes true healing. So it doesn't actually heal the body, but so much it stimulates our mindset. You hear a lot with cancer patients that if you believe you're going to be healed, you will. And that people who give up mentally have a much lower chance of survival in any kind of illness that you have. And so she says it promotes a mental diet of courage, wisdom, and happiness, which is clarifying to the mind and to the feelings of the heart. And it's also indicated for recovery following any kind of surgery or any kind of long-term illness as well. And again, helping to promote this positive mental attitude towards healing and recovery. Now, Freedom Flowers says that it also can be helpful to kind of counteract the fears of illness. So hypochondriacs, whether they be severe or not, or the fear of cancer returning, or the fear of getting cancer in the first time. Like cancer seems to be a theme here with Apple, but it helps you to feel empowered in your own health rather than saying, "Oh, I'm just going to pretend like this isn't going to happen. I'm just going to be in denial of it." So, if you are a person that thinks you need a little bit of a help to your healing mindset, the apple flower essence might be a good one for you. Now, today's oracle card is from the Herb Crafter's Tarot, and it's apple, of course. And it has this picture here of apples on the counter, and one of the I don't know if you have one of these little apple core peeler slicers, but they are amazing. You definitely need to get one. And so it's got a picture of just the apples on the countertop, and they're drying apples and sort of preparing the abundance of apples for storage for the winter, and stringing them up in these dried apple garlands and so on. Now, apples are these kind of ancient trees, again, that humans have been co-evolving with as a food for many, many years. And apples are often used as sort of a this is the nine of earth is the card, and these are all cards that are fruit bearing trees. And so uh they are trees that are called a what's the term? Oh, the central point of a guild. So this is like a permaculture term where the plant, the main tree in sort of a food forest type of growing situation, apples work really great for that, and that they are very beneficial and they're very giving and abundant and so on and so forth. So the words on the card say, savor the fruit of paradise. Of course, apple was the plant thought to be in the Garden of Eden. And savor the fruit of paradise, peace, and plenty. Celebrate wealth by giving. The hidden star of hope sustains us. And of course, they are talking about the center star of the apple, as I hinted earlier. When you have um, five stamens and five pistils, take out the seeds here, you're going to end up with five seeds. And if you, most people don't cut their apples in half like this, they cut them the other way. But if you cut it in half, then you get to see the beautiful star shape in the center of the apple. So the magical center of the apple, um, the hidden star of hope that sustains us. So the apple gives us this wealth of abundance, and it's means that we have plenty to give to others. And this is sort of the message from this card. We have plenty to give to others, and that is actually the true sign of wealth. So we're also talking about health. And which would you rather have, wealth or health? Most people would choose health. And part of that is because you you can always get more wealth, but you can't, if you've lost your health, then you're going to really struggle to have a positive and beneficial life. So one of the things that is so important is, not just what we eat, but what are we consuming overall? And in the book, Lila Debbie says that there's a saying, one bad apple spoils a whole bunch, and that this could easily refer to the poisoning effects of one bad thought on the body and the mind. And I talk about this a fair amount. She says healthy attitudes and, mental health and all these things are just as important as the food that we eat. And so this week, check things. I say this a lot. Check what you're consuming. Have you gotten kind of sucked into watching the news all the time and starting to have that have an effect on your sort of mental health and your overall wellness? So if you have, you might want to put yourself on a different kind of diet and just look more at, like, what is the abundant aspects of our life and of the world around us, not the lack focused that so much of modern media reports to us, and just refocus your health on that. So that's our message from Apple tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. This is show number 99, and I'm going to be doing one more show next week on Halloween. And it's going to be the Wheel of the Year card from the Herb Crafters Tarot that I drew last December to sort of finish up my 100th show. And then I'm going to be taking a break from Flower Power for a couple of months. If you love Flower Power, please feel free to comment below. What is your favorite part about Flower Power? And then when I decide to come back and do some more shows, I would really like to see, what do you like the best about this? I know it's very diverse. It has a lot of things in it, from how to grow the tree to um, the you know essence of the flower. So please let me know what you like the best. And I'll see you next week for the final 100th show of Flower Power. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.